Now in Deadlock, sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming to understand what to buy versus what heroes, and I get it, we've all been in the same situation. And I've been in that same exact situation. I'm against a certain character and I just can't figure out what item will shut them down. And luckily enough for you, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in today's video. My name's Films, an Infernus ranked player and team analyst for Rose Syndicate. And if you find yourself in this situation where you just don't understand what item or what ideas you need to shut down certain heroes, then this is the perfect video for you. And if you like this type of content or want to see more, definitely check out the channel. I got a ton of educational Deadlock videos and even Rivals content, so definitely give it a watch. But anyways, I hope you sit back, relax, and of course, enjoy the show. So to give some context what I'm going to be talking about in this video, I'm going to be going over every single item and idea to counter each and every single character in this game. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're stuck and you just don't know what to do, what to buy, or how to play the game, then I got you covered. Now, of course, not every idea or strategy is one-to-one because there's a lot of variables in this game, but just a general idea so that your itemization might be a little bit better. But anyways, let's get started with Abrams. So the first thing you want to consider is sort of the matchup overview in a sense. So to effectively counter Abrams with Deadlock, you must focus on neutralizing Haze's melee pressure and his massive health sustain. Abrams players look to bait parries with heavy melee animations, and you want to counter this by building things like Spirit Burn early to negate his health drain, and utilizing Rebuttal to win parry shades, and of course you want to avoid close engagements until your damage can outburst his siphon bullets. So your best friends and your best items are things like Indomitable, so that you can block his one instance of a stun with his shoulder dash or his ultimate, Rebuttal, so that you can parry his punches, Spirit Burn, anti-heal for spirit characters, Toxic Bullets, anti-heal for M1 characters, Healbane, ability user anti-heal, Reactive Barrier, so that if you get a shoulder charge onto you or his ultimate onto you, it will proc the reactive barrier and give you a little bit more wiggle room. Then you have things like Unstoppable, just to completely negate his entire ability usage. Then you have an item like Tank Buster, because he builds a lot of HP items. Having Tank Buster as a spirit character is a great idea. Now, something a lot of people kind of sleep on is that yes, you want to buy anti-heal, but when exactly do you want to buy this against this character? If you're facing him in lane, buying a early Healbane is a really good idea because it will cut a lot of his healing down. Later on, you can think about items like Toxic Bullets and even Spirit Burn if you're, again, playing a spirit character, but these are the ideas you want to be thinking about constantly, especially if you're facing him in lane. If you're not facing him in lane, maybe you can think about getting these items a little bit later on, but once he starts becoming problematic, it's going to be really hard to shut down. That's why sometimes, like I emphasized in my itemization video, so check that out if you haven't done so already, buy items that shuts down characters earlier so you're not struggling to get them later on in the match, if that makes sense. Or if you find yourself getting run down by the shoulder charge and melee combos, you can think about an item like Rebuttal, because you want to use Rebuttal to win melee trades. It cuts parry cooldown by half, returning damage to him while granting bonus HP. Now I want to dive even further in and talk about the item breakdown. So Indomitable, it automatically purges hard CC, so stuns, silences, sleeps, roots, you get the idea, and it grants a barrier and proc. It also builds from reactive barrier, and this hard stops enemy ability combos and team play setups, and it has automatic protection, perfect for surviving out of sight initiations. So if you're playing against a character like Abrams who likes to build Phantom Strike, thinking about this item is a good idea. Although it isn't necessarily going to stop the CC, it will give you the instance of the barrier to help you protect yourself. Then you have an item like Rebuttal, which is a heal/return damage on parry, and it cuts the parry cooldown. It cuts parry cooldown from 4 seconds to 2, and it can lane trade winners versus Abrams and Billy, so if you find yourself in those lanes, buying this item first or even second is a very good idea. A lot of people sleep on it, sometimes don't want to give in to the pressure of buying it, but like I've always said, getting early counter items before characters become too problematic is generally a pretty good idea. Then again, if you're playing against an Abrams and you're playing a mouse one character or a character who likes to buy Toxic Bullets, repeatedly shooting reduces healing by 30% and deals % max HP damage. So again, it's best for weapon carries and it's strong against tankier characters because of the % max HP damage. So getting this as a pretty good idea, I would say. Then you have Heal Band, which again, a really strong early game item, especially if you're playing an ability user. Again, spirit damage reduces healing by 35%. 35% is quite a lot. It also grants you healing reward on a kill, so it's great for casters and early lane sustain. So if you're playing against, or if you're playing a character as Mirage, even Grey Town can build it early if you want to. These are all good ideas. Then you have Reactive Barrier. If you find yourself playing against a Bebop or an Abrams, getting Reactive Barrier grants shield automatically when hit by hard CC or hard crowd control. So you can survive hooks, shoulder charges, and it's essential early lane defense against those specific characters. So again, leaning into those items earlier rather than later is generally a good idea. Then you have Unstoppable, which all around is a good item. Pretty much, I would say, mid to late game, regardless of the situation. But again, it's temporary CC immunity, so it's safe entries for your team, finish ultimates without being stunned. You get the idea, everybody knows what Unstoppable is. Then you have Tank Buster. Now, why this item? Well, the big thing about Tank Buster is it does bonus damage versus high HP targets. It bypasses tank armor, and it scales extremely well into late game versus Abrams or any of the tankier heroes in the game. This is why you buy Tank Buster. If you are trying to figure out why you buy this item, just look at the enemy team and decide, are they building a lot of HP or defensive items? Are they scaling with a ton of health like an Abrams? Then Tank Buster is usually the correct answer. And that's essentially how you counter buy into Abrams. Like I said, if you're finding this video helpful in any way, shape, or form, I don't like to, continuously plug. Do me a favor, hit that like button, of course, subscribe to the channel. We're going for 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year. If we could reach that goal, that would be amazing. But anyways, on to the next one. But anyways, I'm moving on to Apollo. Now, with Apollo, it requires, high hiding skills and baiting his riposte. The best Deadlock items against Apollo focus on disabling his recast mobility via Flawless Advance and Disengaging Sigil, and mitigating his spirit burst damage using items like Spellbreaker. Once riposte is on cooldown, he is vulnerable to high burst spirit nukers. So these are things you want to be considering when you're thinking about certain items and ideas. Now, before counterbuying into this character, there's a couple things you need to assess in the lane. Is he doing an extreme amount of damage to you? Are you able to bait out his cooldowns without taking a significant amount of damage? And is he just needlessly and willingly to use a ton of abilities to try to catch you? If you answered yes to these questions, then it's pretty self-explanatory. An item like Slowing Hex is a great way of shutting this character down. Slowing Hex disables his Disengaging Sigil, which is his first ability, and Flawless Advance, which is his third ability. However, it does not stop his riposte, meaning he can still activate it while having a Slowing Hex on him, because for whatever reason, it's not considered a movement ability in quotations. But regardless, Slowing Hex is still a great item to shut this character down. Moving on, probably the biggest friend to stopping this character is Counterspell. So again, the next parry blocks all ability damage and effects. Counterspell. So when an Apollo is ulting onto you, you don't want to counterspell at the beginning of the ult when it first initially hits you. You want to hit it a little bit later on during the slowdown animation, because if you do it too early, you're going to miss time and take all the damage, but if you time it right, you won't take any damage from his ultimate, completely making his ultimate practically useless to you, which is a big thing. Typically, this is used as an execution when you're very low, so being able to counterspell this at the end is a very good idea. Following that, for whatever reason, if you can't time it, it's perfectly fine. Then you can think about getting an item like Spellbreaker, because it's a massive spirit resist and debuff reduction. It acts as counter spirit burst, and it has a ton of durability, so these are good ideas. Also, if you find yourself playing into him and you're just taking a lot of repeated spirit damage, an early item like Spirit Shielding, and then later on into Spirit Resilience is a great idea because it gives passive spirit resistance, and it's a basic spell defense that's scaling durability, which is extremely useful because a lot of the time, a lot of characters in this game build spirit, so an item like Spirit Res is usually a good idea. Now again, because this character likes his abilities, he likes to use his abilities, silencing abilities or silencing items are a good idea. If you're playing an M1 silencing wave, if you're playing an M1 silencer, if you're playing any character that likes to build silencing wave, it's generally a good idea. Or if you're playing a character that uses focus lens with Spirit Sap, getting focus lens, putting it onto Apollo is also a really good idea, as well as curse and much more. Another great item is Mystic Slow because it slows enemies hit by your abilities. It's really good for anti-kiting and group crowd control, so these are the items you really want to be thinking about. The biggest takeaways to think about in lane is to bait his riposte with basic gunfire first, and you want to never use big spells to bait out his riposte. If you find yourself taking a ton of damage, getting an early spirit shielding is a really good idea. Getting an early slowing hex is also another really good idea because it will just completely shut him down in lane so he can't really jump on you. So these are all good things to be thinking about constantly. Now moving on to Bebop. So bidding against Bebop generally just requires really good and constant map awareness and hook blocking capability. You want to use things like Dispel Magic to drop the sticky bombs on the floor, and a Yamato to break his hook, especially if you're playing against, again, if you're playing against a character like Bebop, like a Holiday, a Mo and Krill, those three specific characters, then Indomitable is usually the right call. If you're not playing against those characters, you can think about Counterspell and just counterspell the hook or get Unstoppable as well. If we're looking at the items specifically, you want to think about items like I previously mentioned, Indomitable to break his hook, Dispel Magic to drop the bomb stacks, Divine Barrier to cleanse the bomb if you need to, Knockdown while he's ulting, you knock him down, Counterspell, you can counterspell the bomb damage, but he will still gain the stacks, or you can just counterspell his raw damage in general. Then an early gain item, Spirit Shielding with Reactive Barrier, and because this character gets lifesteal with his uppercut, getting an item like an early Heal Bane is a really good idea, so you can take a lot of trades that still have a lot of impact to him, even if you're still taking a lot of damage. Now there is a lot of other niche items you could pick up, but those are the most, basic ones. Like I said, for against a Bebop, if he's building bomb, your early game items should be considered of Reactive Barrier, Spirit Shielding, Heal Bane, and Counterspell. Those are generally like the early game options that you should be thinking about all the time. If you can't get Counterspell, maybe Dispel Magic if you find yourself in a lobby where there's an Infernus, there's a Mirage, there's a Bebop, getting an early Dispel Magic just to counter all those characters as well, it's just a good addition. Now moving on to Billy. So two things with Billy in lane. He has high fire rate, and he does a ton of melee spamming. So the key to countering him is thinking about items that counter this playstyle. Rusted Barrel slows his fire rate pressure in lane, and then Rebuttal is probably the best option against Billy because it allows you to get returned healing to yourself and damage to him, as well as bringing the parry cooldown down as well from 42. So again, Rebuttal, heal return damage on parry. It cuts the parry cooldown, it cuts it from 4 to 2, and you can lane trade versus Abrams and Billy. Great idea. Counterspell. You can counterspell his ultimate, and it also is a really good skill-based defense. If you manage to counterspell his ultimate, or you just counterspell damage in general, you still have a parry after that, but it won't be a counterspell in quotations. But you still have another parry essentially, so you get multiple. Some other ideas to be thinking about is items like Suppressor because it reduces his fire rate and it move on spirit damage. So generally a decent idea. Plated Armor could be an addition as well. Reactive Barrier, generally a good idea because it grants shield automatically when hit by hard crowd control effects. Hard crowd control could be his Rising Ram ability, his bash down, and even his ultimate, but at this point in the game you should be understanding how to counterspell Billy's abilities. Moving on to Calico, it's thinking about how to stop her from moving around the map, so anti-mobility, anti-heal, and things of that sort. Your whole idea is to stop her from snowballing into the game and just becoming an absolute menace throughout the entirety of the game. So some items to be thinking about, first and foremost, slowing hex, because it stops her from using her pretty much all of her abilities except for her gloom bombs for the most part. So understanding slowing hex is a really good idea. Also, Capacitor, if you're playing a character that likes to build Tesla bullets and then later on builds Capacitor, it slows, prevents stamina, and it silences movement. It's also a great late game pinning tool and it stops slippery heroes like Calico, so a great idea. Curse is also a good idea because it's one of the hardest counter items. If you're playing a character that likes to build Curse as a support character like a Paige, maybe a Rem, this is a good idea. Also, Heal Bane, because she likes to build into some Spirit lifesteal, getting an early Heal Bane is generally a good idea. Ethereal Shift is another idea that you can use because it allows you to briefly become invulnerable and untargetable to try to dodge her full combo. You can also think of an item like Silence Wave because she is a character that likes to build a lot of abilities, or she builds items for her abilities, so getting an item like Silence Wave so that she can't do any combos onto you is another good idea. Pairing that with a slowing hexen, Calico becomes practically useless. Now when it comes to Celeste, there's a couple things to focus on. You want to focus on grounding her from the air and isolating yourself during her ultimate. So building early spirit shielding to absorb the bouncing utility, and a Dynamo to cleanse her setup. She thrives on grouped targets, so maintaining spacing in teamfights is an essential idea. The items you want to be thinking about against a character like Celeste is Knockdown, because it grounds flyers. Although she's not a flyer, she's in the air for quite a long time, so getting this item is a good idea. Capacitor, it slows, prevents stamina, and it silences movement, so all really good ideas. She is a heavy spirit burst damage character, so getting an early spirit shielding or reactive barrier is generally a good idea, because the barrier procs on ability damage and it can survive a ton of bursts in lane, and it's generally the standard defense versus a caster. Also, Counterspell, generally a good idea against a lot of characters as well. Mystic Slow, if you're playing a character that likes to buy Mystic Slow, maybe you're playing a character like McGinnis, getting this item is really good. Also, Healbane, spirit damage reduce healing by 35%. Healing is rewarded on a kill. Getting Healbane against a character like Celeste is generally a good idea, as well as Unstoppable, because it's also just a generally good idea. The thing about this character is the best way to shut her down is anti-movement abilities. Anything that will slow or stop her movement is really good. Knockdown is going to be your best friend in this scenario, so getting an early knockdown, if you're playing a character that builds it, is generally a good idea. Also, she sits in the same realm with Calico, and I guess a character like Apollo, that they like to use abilities. So getting stuff that stops the ability usage is generally a good idea. Silence Wave, Silencer on M1's, Focus Lens on, whoever builds Focus Lens as you want, but generally those are the ideas you want to be thinking about. Moving on to the Dwifta. So with the Drifter, there's a lot of things to consider. So generally against this character, he excels in 1v1 isolation duels due to his Bloodline passive. So one of the biggest ideas about dealing with this character in general before you buy items is to counter him by traveling as a duo or a trio. Having somebody to hover you while a Drifter is in a game is generally a good idea, so that the Bloodline passive doesn't proc and that you're able to shut him down relatively quickly. But with items, there's a couple things to consider. This character likes to build some gun items, whether it's weighted shots, silencer, or anything else. Getting a early rusted barrel in lane, then building into Disarming Hex a little bit later on is generally your best friend, because it's anti-carry disruption and it's a combat disrupt for a lot of the characters. Disarming Hex is a very slept on item, I think, and a lot more people need to be buying it if you find yourself in those situations while you're laning against an M1, or you already know you're playing against an M1 or some character that likes to shoot their gun. Getting Disarming Hex is generally a good idea. Then with this character, you have Dispel Magic, which purges non-ultimate negative effects. It counters effects like Drifter's Mark, so that the Drifter can't teleport to you. If you're able to instantly cleanse the Dispel Magic, if you're able to instantly cleanse the Mark, he can't TP onto you. Leave it for like a second, then it can TP onto you, so instantly cleansing it is a really good idea. It's also a relatively long cooldown for Drifter, so getting that out of the picture is generally a good idea. Following that, Metal Skin. Metal Skin is extremely good into Drifter, especially right now. But if he's leaning a little bit more Spirit, you have to consider that, and maybe Metal Skin isn't the right approach. If he's leaning more Spirit, getting Spirit anti-items is generally a good idea as well. A little bit later on, if this character is building more into gun, you can think about plated armor to shut down a lot of his damage in general if you don't want to buy Metal Skin. But like I said, if he's building gun, usually the best course of action is just going Metal Skin because it's full immunity, whereas plated armor is only, a little bit of a passive bullet resistance, which is nice. But if you don't get a lot of value out of plated armor in one match, then it's not really worth it. If you're playing against multiple characters, like, I don't know, let's say a M1 plus Drifter plus another gun character, then getting plated armor is a good idea. If it's only just one character like Dwifta, then getting Metal Skin is typically the best idea. Moving on to Dynamo, there's a couple things to consider. The first thing is Knockdown, because while in his ultimate, if he doesn't have Unstoppable or Indomitable, you can use Knockdown to completely shut it down. Also, Knockdown is generally just a good idea in a lot of cases. The same thing can be said with Curse, because it is an interrupt, it silences and disarms, as well as removing buffs. So using a Curse on Dynamo is usually a good idea. Superior Stamina to outrun him, Reactive Barrier, because he has CC with his wave ability, that's what I like to call it. Warp Stone to get out of his ult, and Ethereal Shift because it makes you completely invulnerable and untargetable for a short duration, so popping this is generally a good idea. Also, buying Unstoppable in general against a Dynamo early is usually just a good idea as well. Realistically, this character can be shut down relatively easily. If you're understanding how to play into him, Silence Wave is also a really good idea because he likes to use abilities. These are all things you should be considering throughout the entire duration of playing against him. Right now with Graves, there's not a ton of people playing Graves, so that's one thing to consider, but the biggest thing to consider if you find yourself in a situation is destroying her summons as quickly as possible. Getting rid of the skulls, getting rid of the tombstone, whatever the case may be, is generally a good idea. A couple things to consider is that she likes to build healing items, and she likes to sustain herself, so getting Spirit Burn or Anti-Heal is a good idea. Also, monster rounds versus her summons is a good idea as well, because you do bonus damage versus summons and minions, and as well as troopers, so NPCs, so good idea. Restorative Locket, consume stacks to heal yourself, so it does lane health resetting, and anti-poke survival. Health Bane or Heal Bane, spirit damage reduces healing by 35%, really good idea. Outfire, because it allows you to clear, turrets and summons extremely fast, and it denies ground space. So these are some things to consider. Warpstone to TP out of the area, Dispel Magic to cleanse her line ability, all good ideas to be constantly thinking about. With Great Talon, because he is a flyer, Knockdown is one of your biggest friends. He grounds flyers with a longer stun, and after 2 seconds delay. So Knockdown, great item. Spellbreaker, counters Spirit Burst and it's really good durability. Spirit Resilience, passive Spirit Resistance. Spirit Shielding, barrier procs on ability damage. Warp Zone to try to get away from the bird. Counterspell to counterspell the bird as well. These are all things you want to be considering if they're building Spirit. So anti-bird whatever. If they're building gun, you can think about Disarming Hex, but generally just Knockdown, Spellbreaker, Counterspell, that sort of idea. Moving on to Haze, probably the one most annoying character right now, especially with the Echo Shard Dagger. Hopefully by the time this video releases, something will be done about it, but for now, this is what to be thinking about. In the early game, she buys Fixation, or she levels into Fixation, so getting Rusted Barrel early is a good idea. You want to break LOS frequently to reset her passive bullet stack, so these are things to be thinking about. Words are hard sometimes. Metal Skin as well. Suppressor reduces fire rate. Juggernaut slows enemy fire rate when hit. Knockdown to cancel her ultimate if she's ulting. Return Fire is a really good idea. Silence Wave because she likes to use abilities. Reactive Barrier, which grants a shield automatically when hit by hard crowd control effects, which is her Sleep Dagger. Some things to consider. You want to get Indomitable, so when the Sleep Dagger hits you, you're able to have a second to pop one of your abilities, that being like a Metal Skin Return Fire type of idea, or something else. Being able to layer certain active items into Indomitable is the best way to get value out of that item. Without that active items, Indomitable is not that best of an item in my opinion, but if you're able to layer things, then it's a good idea. Moving on to Holiday, it's the same idea with Mo and Krill and other characters. Indomitable, you have that instance of being able to protect yourself from a thing like her lasso if she's just straight up lassoing, like a Mo and Krill, like a Bebop hook, but otherwise you want to use a counterspell. If you have the faster reaction time, you can counterspell her lasso, so it doesn't even work. But if you can't, getting Unstoppable or Indomitable is generally a good idea. You also want to get Rescue Beam if you're playing a support character that builds into that, because you can pull the person getting lassoed away from the lasso and just canceling out the effect. Slowing Hex is a good idea. Knockdown, really good idea. Reactive Barrier, Warp Zone, Ethereal Shift, all excellent ideas, and what they do is pretty self-explanatory. Knockdown, stun her out of the ultimate, stop her from moving onto your team. Reactive Barrier procs when you get lassoed, Warp Stone to try to dodge out of her ultimate, Ethereal Shift to have that invulnerability to protect yourself if you do get lassoed and have a second to live. With Infernus, it's the same sort of ideal with a lot of the other characters in this game. Dispel Magic to get rid of his Afterburn and Toxic Bullets usually. Spirit Burn because he likes to build HP items and Spirit Lifesteal, so getting Anti-Heal, Healbane, and other sorts are really good ideas. Debuff Reducer to reduce the effects of Afterburn, Counterspell to counterspell his ultimate, slowing Hex so he's not able to run around and Flame Dash, Rusted Barrel to slow his fire rate, into a Disarming Hex so he can't shoot at all, then Plated Armor because it takes a lot more time to build up Toxic Bullets and Afterburn. Usually by now, it's a lot easier to shut down these characters. Moving on to Ivy, the items you want to be considering is Indomitable to protect yourself from the one instant silence. Of course, Unstoppable is usually the better option, but if you find yourself in a game where you get a lot of value out of Indomitable paired with other active abilities, then it might be the answer. Spirit Burn because she has a lifesteal, or she gets healing with her stone form, and her tether, so these are things to consider. Knockdown because she's going to be flying around with her ultimate, so getting early knockdown is a good idea. Counterspell to protect yourself from stone form, Warp Stone to warp away from the stone form, Reactive Barrier, Curse, extra stamina to try to get out of the AoE, all really good ideas. For Kelvin, it's a big thing with anti-heal, so Spirit Burn, eventually later on to the game, Healbane, Toxic Bullets are some of your best friends. Dominable if you need it, again, not my biggest recommendation. Unstoppable, very good as well. Enduring Speed, because speed and slow resistance. His Arctic Blast or Arctic Beam slows you, so having some sort of slow resist is a really good idea. Spirit Resilience, Fleet Foot, all really good ideas to be considering. Moving on to Geist. Again, it's the same case with a lot of characters. She does a lot of healing or self-healing, so anti-heal, Spirit Burn, Healbane, those sort of items, Toxic Bullets. If you're playing a character like a support, more leaning, you can think about Curse, Spirit Resilience, Knockdown. If you're playing other characters, Dispel Magic, Silence Wave. Geist likes to swap on low HP. If you're going into a fight knowing this, getting an early Silence Wave, silencing the Geist before she can swap. She can't swap, you kill her, and she's out of the fight. So getting an early Silence Wave, generally a good idea. The same thing can be said with Curse, but typically Silence Wave is also really good. Also, Counterspell, you can counterspell her ultimate, her swap, so this is also really good. Moving on to Lash, if he's going for ultimates, Knockdown, Counterspell, Unstoppable, Indomitable, all really good ideas at countering his ultimate. If he's building more into Spirit, you can think about Spellbreaker. If he's getting away a lot, things like Slowing Hex, Silence Wave, really good. And if you find yourself getting bursted down a lot, Reactive Barrier, because it grants shield automatically when hit by hard crowd control, so having those options is a relatively good idea. If he's leaning more into the gun, you can think about Rusted Barrel, Disarming Hex, Rusted Barrel and Disarming Hex if he's building more gun, like I said. Moving on to Megadance, there's a couple things you need to ask yourself. First, if she is leaning more into the turret build, you can think about Monster Rounds to quickly get rid of her turrets, Alchemic Fire to get rid of a lot of the turrets in a small AoE, Rusted Barrel to slow her fire rate, and Disarming Hex because she likes to shoot her gun. Metal Skin, generally a good idea, Warp Stone to try to get away from the walls, as well as Curse. Some other things to consider is Dispel Magic, Unstoppable, those sort of items, because she's going to be super annoying to deal with regardless of the situation. As well as Knockdown for her ultimate, if she is using ultimate without Unstop, Knockdown, really good idea. So with Mina, there's a couple things, right? So you have Curse, you have Silencer, Silence Wave, Focus Lens, those items to shut down the character. She likes to use abilities, so really good ideas. Disarming Hex because she likes to shoot her gun quite a lot to build up Love Bites. Spirit Resilience to protect yourself from the spirit damage she does. Spirit Shielding as well. Healing Right and Knockdown. She does a lot of damage in lane, so getting it early. Healing Right to heal yourself back up to full so she doesn't one-tap you with Rake is generally a good idea. As well as Knockdown, make sure to wait 2 of her bats out, then use Knockdown on top of her. As well as a early Slowing Hex is generally a good idea. Moving on to Mirage, probably one of the more nuisances of the game currently. Dispel Magic to get rid of his Jin's Mark, and Scarabs early is a really good idea. I wouldn't necessarily say Metal Skin because right now the people are more leaning in towards a spirit heavy build with this character, so Metal Skin is up in the air. Healbane, really good idea because his Scarab Beetles like to, proc life regen and health stealing, so having Healbane is a good idea. Slowing Hex so you can't use his Tornadoes, Curse as well, Suppressor, Reactive Barrier, and of course Toxic Bullets. Slowing Hex is very useful, so you can't Tornado like I said, especially if it doesn't have Dispel Magic yet, so those are good ideas. Curse, really good. Those are the things you want to be looking out for. As well as Knockdown, just using any way to shut the character down, as well as Disarming Hex, just to try to stop his snowball. Anyways, moving on to Mohammedan Kareem, he has a lot of lifesteal, so Spirit Burn, Healbane, Toxic Bullets, Tank Buster, those items, a lot of HP, so Tank Buster, really good item. Unstoppable, Indomitable to break free from his ultimate, to Rescue Beam to pull the person getting Mo and Krill ulted towards you. Yes, he will still be getting ulted, but it's an easy way to try to burst down the Mo and Krill. Knockdown while he's ulting people, Bullet Resist Shredder, Metal Skin if you want to, and Reactive Barrier, of course. So these are all ideas to be considering. Moving on to Paige, you have Indomitable to break someone for a utility and ult if you need to. Again, Unstoppable is usually the best alternative to Indomitable and something you should always be prioritizing. Dispel Magic to get out of her route, Curse to stop her abilities, extra stamina to try to get away, Healbane because she likes to shield and give healing, Silence Wave because she likes to use abilities, Reactive Barrier to protect yourself from the crowd control, Knockdown to just slow and stop her, Slowing Hex, just trying to jump on top of the Paige before she gets a ton of use and utility out is generally the best idea. Moving on to Paradox, yes, Indomitable, Unstoppable, all really good ideas. Counterspell to be able to counterspell her ultimate, Dispel Magic to dispel the bomb stacks with a Warp Stone to try to get out of the way, Silence Wave because she likes to use abilities, Debuff Reducer to reduce the effects of Silence, Ethereal Shift to give yourself a little bit of an iframe if you hear that swap come out, as well as Reactive Barrier, all really good ideas. I mean, hopefully by now you are beginning to see the pattern with a lot of these characters. If there's a lot of HP in the question for the character, then anti-heal, so Healbane, Toxic Bullets, Spirit Burn, generally the best rule of thumb. Other ideas, with it's a character that has a lot of movement, you think about Knockdown, Slowing Hex, Focus Lens, those ideas, so the character can't move around a ton and use abilities. If they're an ability user, Silencing Effects, Silence Wave, Focus Lens, Silencer, all really good ideas. Moving on to Pocket. Pocket is a heavy ability user, so guess what? Silencer, Silence Wave, Curse, Focus Lens, those items are really beneficial. Then moving on to his ultimate, Debuff Reducer, Counterspell, those items are really good. He's a Spirit Nuker, so Spirit Res, Spirit Shielding, all relatively good items. Divine Barrier can be used to counter his ultimate, and yes, everybody on your team can buy Divine Barrier, but usually you want to emphasize on the players that are doing supportive utility. So these are characters like Paige, Rem, Visc, those are the characters that traditionally buy Divine Barrier, but a character like Lash or a Paradox could also buy that for your team if need be. Slowing Hex, Silence Wave, really good as well. Moving on to Rem. So with Rem, he has CC with his ultimate, so Reactive Barrier, Counterspell to counter his ultimate as well. Monster Rounds, so you can destroy his empowered troopers. Anti-heal because he does healing, so Healbane, Spirit Burn, Toxic Bullets. He uses his abilities a lot, so Silence Wave is a really good idea. Knockdown to stop his ultimate. Of course, he gets unstoppable now, but you get the idea behind that. Then you have Slowing Hex, so you can't tag along to his teammates, is a really good idea as well. That basically is a 2-1. The first is he can't tag along to his teammates and escape. The second is he can't tag along and heal his teammates, so it's a 2-in-1 item that gets a lot of value. So if you find yourself playing against a Rem, Slowing Hex, very good idea. So moving on to 7, the biggest thing is you want to get a knockdown early, especially if he doesn't have Unstoppable, if he's not in any fights, getting that item basically destroys his entire purpose and entire kit. He has a lot of lifesteal with Spiritual Overflow and a Fuser eventually later on, so getting anti-heal items like Spirit Burn, Toxic Bullets, and Healbane are really good ideas. Getting an item like Curse if you don't want to get knocked down, but later on have the extra money, Curse is also a really good idea. You can also get Warp Stone to get out of his ultimate AoE. You have Suppressor to slow his fire rate. You have Spirit Resilience to, do less damage. You also have Dispel Magic to dispel his stun. And you also have Counterspell to counterspell his stun as well. Of course, Dispel Magic is a little bit better than wasting your Counterspell for that specific reason. Moving on to Shiv. Shiv is a character that is rather annoying to deal with. So, items to think about: Spirit Burn, first one. Toxic Bullets, Heal Bane. He likes, lifesteal. He has his bloodletting, so having these anti-heal items is a really good idea. Slowing Hex will disable his ability to do a large right click. Also, his dash ability. You can also get Disarming Hex, so he can't shoot his gun at all, and he can't move around the map. You also have Dispel Magic to get rid of his knives and his Slice and Dice effect. Counterspell to counterspell his damage and ultimate. Spellbreaker, Spirit Shielding, Debuff Reducer are all really good items. Also, Knockdown, fantastic item as well. Curse, also really good. The idea behind this is just to try to stop his damage and his movement, because the character thrives on movement and is long sustained damage. Moving on to Silver, so there's a couple things. Disarming Hex, while in wolf form she can't attack. In human form she can't shoot her gun, so pretty self-explanatory. She transforms, gains a lot of HP, she has a lot of lifesteal, so getting Heal Bane, Toxic Bullets, Spirit Burn, all really good. She likes to use her abilities quite a lot, so Silence Wave, pretty good. Suppressor, Metal Skin is very good, as well as Plated. I would lean more into Metal Skin though. Warpstone to try to get away from her. Curse to curse her, not use abilities. Slowing Hex as well is a really good idea. These are some things you want to be keeping in mind. Moving on to Sinclair. Counterspell to counterspell his bunny. Spirit Shielding, because he does a lot of spirit damage in the early game. Spellbreaker as well, if he's doing a lot of damage. Slowing Hex, so he can't use his assistant TP. Reactive Barrier, because he uses some sort of crowd control effect, that being his bunny, so if you have Reactive Barrier and you don't have Counterspell, that can be an item to use. Extra Stamina and Fleetfoot to try to get out of his bunny AoE. You can also use Curse and other items, but generally you want to think about Slowing Hex and Counterspell are the two big things I would say. As well as Unstoppable, of course, pretty self-explanatory as to why you get it. But yeah, those are the those are the items you want to be thinking about. Moving on to Doorman, you have a couple things. First, you have Counterspell. You can Counterspell his cart, you can Counterspell his ultimate, so all really good ideas. Warpstone, you can Warpstone away from him, or you get out of his ultimate and you survive it and you don't get knocked down. You can Warpstone out of his ultimate, like after, and try to get back to the door. Slowing Hex to try to slow and catch him. Knockdown to try to stop him from ulting you, unless he has his final upgrade where he's unstoppable, then that's a whole different thing. Superior Stamina, so if you do get cast into the Baroness, you have the ability to use Superior Stamina. Reactive Barrier, so that when you get hit with CC from his cart or his ultimate, you have the ability to have an extra shield. Spirit Shielding, because he does a lot of spirit damage. Unstoppable. These are all ideas you should be constantly thinking about. Moving on to Venator, he's an M1 carry, so a mouse one, a person that likes to shoot his gun a lot, so there's a lot of things to consider. You have Metal Skin, which just completely negates all of his gun damage. You have Plated Armor eventually later on into the match, if you need it, and there's an instance where you need to buy it because there's multiple M1 carries on the other team or multiple gun characters, then getting Plated is generally a good idea. Disarming Hex is a really slept on item that if you're playing against a mouse 1 carry or a M1 or position 1 character, getting an item like Disarming Hex is a must, as well as Suppressor because it slows the rate of fire. Warpstone to try to warp out of the way, Debuff Reducer to reduce the effects of Gut Shot onto you. You can also think about, just the items that slow fire rate are generally decent items, I would say. Counterspell to counterspell his some of his ultimate shots, at least one, not all of them, one. You can get Dispel Magic to dispel the nade damage and the nade passive. Those are things you can be thinking about. Although I would mainly think about Disarming Hex, Plated, or Metal Skin, depending on the circumstance. Moving on to Viktor. So there's two things with Viktor. If he's building Spirit, you can think about Curse, Spirit Burn, Silencing Wave, Heal Bane, those sort of items. But if he's building more gun, more leaning towards gun, then you want to look less at the silences and more into just raw damage, so like Toxic Bullets, Silencer, those items. But generally speaking, the items you really want to consider is Curse, because that is like the ultimate way to shut the character down. So investing into an early Curse is a really good way of shutting just a Viktor down completely and making him utterly useless. Moving on to Vindicta, there's a couple things with Vindicta. Knockdown is a must. Come on guys, it's a flying character, she does more damage when she's flying, she's always going to be flying, so knockdown, very good. Phantom Strike is another character, if you are a character that builds Phantom Strike, like a Krill, a Silver, an Abrams, you could even throw Billy into the mix as well, and maybe even a Haze if you want to. This is a good item to try to bring down the flying Vindicta. Metal Skin, good idea. Dispel Magic to dispel the stake. Slowing Hex so she can't get into her flight. You can knock her down and then slowing Hex her so she can't get into the flight, right? Silencer, because she likes to use her ability, she likes to snipe. Disarming Hex, very, very good. Here again, Plated Armor, Reactive Barrier, and of course Warp Stone. These are all, core identities and core items you should be thinking about all the time. Moving on to Viscous, there's a couple things with Viscous. The first one is Rebuttal. If he's leaning more into the punch build, Rebuttal is an excellent idea. Knockdown, very good against a character like Viscous. Silence Wave, because he likes to use his abilities. Silencer, Focus Lens, all very good. Warp Stone to try to get out of his AoE. Spirit Shielding as well as Spirit Resilience, because he likes to hit you with a lot of damage. Rescue Beam, Rusted Barrel, in the early stages, Suppressor because he likes to shoot and does quite a lot. Disarming Hex, especially because if he is building the Mystic Shot, Express Shot build, getting a Disarming Hex is very good because it allows him to not be able to shoot his gun, so this is a very good idea. Moving on to Vyper, there's a couple things with Vyper. First, Dispel Magic. You can dispel Lethal Venom, very good. Extra Regen, because she has an Execute with Lethal Venom, you want to maintain your HP pool, especially in the early stages of laning phase, so either a Healing Right or Extra Regen or Restorative Shot, whatever keeps you healthy in lane is generally the good idea. Spirit Shielding so Lethal Venom doesn't proc on you and explode you. Rusted Barrel into Disarming Hex, of course, is really good. Slowing Hex so she's not able to use her stamina. Disarming Hex, like I previously mentioned, very good. Metal Skin, Plated Armor, very good ideas, as well as Return Fire, a very good item right now. If you pair Metal Skin with Return Fire, she can practically instantly kill herself, and it'll be very beneficial for yourself. Moving on to Warden. A couple things with Warden. Knockdown, extra stamina to get away from him because his flask gets rid of stamina, so having extra stamina generally a good idea. Heal Bane because he likes to get a life steal with his ultimate, so anti-heal really good. You also have Rusted Barrel to slow his fire rate, go into Disarming Hex so he can't shoot his gun. Juggernaut to slow his fire rate, Silence Wave because he likes to use some of his abilities, Disarming Hex, Toxic Bullets are all relatively good ideas. Again, Dispel Magic so you can get out of his cage and try to get away from him essentially. Those are all things you want to be constantly thinking about, especially depending on how he's building his build. If he's leaning more gun, Disarming Hex and everything else is very nice. If he's leaning more Spirit and going the ult build, Knockdown, Focus Lens, those sort of items are very good. Moving on to Wraith, there's a couple things. Counterspell, you can counterspell her ultimate if you're fast enough. Disarming Hex, very good. Ethereal Shift, she's trying to burst you with all of her cards. Rusted Barrel into Disarming Hex, of course. Spirit Shielding, Metal Skin, Curse, Dispel Magic, all relatively good. Knockdown, Slowing Hex, all really good items as well. Moving on to Yamato, yes, everybody hates this character right now, but there's a couple things to consider. Spirit Burn, pretty good. Silence Wave, she likes to use her abilities. Curse, very good. Counterspell, extremely good to counterspell her Crimson Slash and her first ability. Spirit Shielding, for the early game, Heal Bane, Toxic Bullets, Ethereal Shift. Some things to also consider. Dispel Magic. You can dispel the grapple she's going onto you. You can dispel it, break line of sight so she can't grapple onto you again, and just get out scot-free. A lot of people sleep on this item against the Yamato, and I think you really need to start considering it a lot more. This is one of the best ways at keeping yourself alive against the Yamato currently that a lot of people are sleeping on. Yes, the ability is super dumb, but dispel matching it is a really good way of just shutting down the whole entire playstyle. And that's pretty much how you can counter build every single character in this game. Now, I want to go into the next segment just a little bit and talk about just general thoughts and ideas to be constantly thinking about. Now, if you made it this far into the video, or if you're skipping to this section of the video, welcome. If you haven't done so already, make sure to hit that like button. Of course, subscribe to the channel if you're new. But this section is essentially if you're lazy. And if you don't want to listen to all of my yapping in the previous sections, here's a little bit of a condensed version. There's a couple questions you want to ask yourself when you're going into a match and you're in the laning phase. The first question is identifying the characters you're playing against in the lane. What is their strength, essentially? What is their win condition? So some things to consider. If you're playing against, like, for example, an Apollo and Abrams, you have to think to yourself, okay, Apollo, he does a lot of spirit damage early, he has a lot of movement. What is the best way to shut down this character? Well, getting spirit shielding early and thinking about getting a relatively early slowing hex is also a really good way of shutting the character down if you find it very problematic. That's one step. The second step is the other character, let's say Abrams. Abrams likes to get a lot of HP back and he does melee damage, so considering Healbane is really good. So when you think about their kits, you see Abrams gets a lot of HP back with Siphon Life and his Infernal Resilience. Then you have Apollo, who gets damage back with his, healing with his Flawless Advance. That's healing and healing, so getting an item like Healbane, very good idea early on because it's killing two birds with one stone. You're doing anti-heal to two characters that want to get healing. The second is movement. Apollo likes to use movement with his Disengaging Sigil and his Flawless Advance. Abrams uses Shoulder Charge for movement, so getting early slowing hex again is two birds with one stone. So that's two items, both being 1600, that you can use to shut down those two characters relatively easily. This is why knowing the matchups you're going into is extremely beneficial. But like I said, I think the questions you need to be asking yourself is, what is the win condition for the enemies? What do they like to buy so that you understand what to be thinking about? Are they playing a M1? If they're playing an M1 on the enemy team, it should be like a no-brainer to be thinking about items like Disarming Hex, Metal Skin, and some type of bullet resistance eventually. And again, buying those items before the enemies get too problematic is generally a good rule of thumb. The second thing to consider, does the character like to move around the map a lot? And does the character like to move with abilities a lot? Like a Calico, again, an Apollo, again. So having a slowing hex or some way to shut down this movement is a really good idea. The third ideal, or the third question is, does the character like to use their abilities? If they're not an M1 character, if they're not a character that presses, mouse 1 and just shoots the entire game, chances are they're an ability user. That means getting some sort of silence is a really good idea. For example, again, Calico or an Apollo or someone else that uses abilities, getting, silence is really a good idea because that's essentially just getting rid of their entire damage and entire utility. So understanding those key small ideas is extremely beneficial to counter buying a lot of the characters in this game. But when it comes to an item like Rebuttal, this is a very situational, item. The situation is that you're playing against a Billion or Abrams in lane, or even a Viscus if he's going more more punch. But if you're not playing against those characters, identifying what characters like to punch outside of the main punchers, in quotations, so like a Yamato, a Calico, buying an item like Rebuttal in that circumstance can be really good because at the end of their combo, they like to usually throw in a light melee. So getting Rebuttal, understanding the pattern and how they're meleeing can be super beneficial for you. There's these small things that you eventually identify in patterns of play, especially in a game like this, that you'll understand how to exploit, like I previously mentioned, with a Calico going for a slash into a light melee, understanding that pattern, getting Rebuttal is a really good idea. Or a Yamato grappling in, going for a light melee after, and pairing at that circumstance or that instance is also a really good idea. So it's just understanding these patterns is a really good idea. But anyways, hopefully this video has helped you in any way, shape, or form. I did my best to try to explain everything in the best order. If you want individual character full breakdowns, let me know in the comments down below. Or if you have your own questions like that, definitely let me know in the comments down below as well. I try to answer all the questions as best as I can. If you're familiar with my itemization video as well, definitely recommend it if you haven't done so already. And if you have any other ideas that you would like to see in future videos, do let me know in the comments down below. And I do want to mention, by the time I'm uploading this video, Yoshi has made a statement that there should be a matchmaking update coming in the next week. So the week, let me actually get this. So the week of the 30th. So hopefully by then we will see some sort of a matchmaking update so that you can actually put these counters to the test. But like I said, hopefully this video has helped you in any way, shape, or form. If you haven't done so already, hit that like button. Of course, subscribe to the channel if you're new and haven't done so already. And if you want to help me out a little bit further, you can consider becoming a YouTube member. But regardless, I hope you have a great and safe day, and I'll catch you in the next one.